Hello, and welcome all to the Partnered Primary Care Research Podcast. Research for you, by you. A podcast dedicated to learning more about patient and community partners in patient-oriented primary care research in Canada. The Primary and Integrated Healthcare Innovations Network is proud to present this podcast with a focus on public representation in health. Join us to discover who our community partners are in our network and the people who work with them.
Hi, and welcome to the Partnered Primary Care Research Podcast, Research for You, by you. My name is Jillian Bartlett-Escalon, and I'm the Executive Director of the Network Coordinating Office of the Primary and Integrated Healthcare Innovations Network. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me Kent Cadogan Loftsgard, who's from British Columbia, and he will be talking to us about his experience as a patient partner in our network. Welcome, Kent. So to get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Jillian, and a little bit about myself. Well, as you said, I am located here on the west coast of British Columbia in Vancouver by the shores of Jericho Beach, where we have been communicating and broadcasting in various forms virtually for the length of the pandemic. And I am a patient by virtue of my lived experience of congenital cerebral palsy and pediatric asthma. But I also come from a fairly diverse health and science background that actually even began while I was still a teenager looking for something to do during the summers. And I decided to study paramedicine that at that time was being delivered by the St. John ambulance people. And I had a very forward-thinking instructor who, even though she knew that some of the physical procedures were going to be challenging for me due to the nature of my cerebral palsy, the deal that she made with me was that so long as I could learn the material well enough to be able to describe procedures to people who didn't know anything about it, then they would consider that sufficient to pass the course. So that really was the beginning basis of my clinical education that was the complement to my patient experience growing up, being very well served by our BC Children's Hospital here, the campus of the 1980s, which was the second generation campus at the time. And now we're just on to the third generation campus that's been open now for a couple of years. But during my time as a pediatric patient at Children's, I like to say that I learned a lot more by demonstration than by declaration about what is and what was really good patient-centered care long before anybody else that I heard from ever was using that term. And that was really my inspiration to put healthcare at much of the center of my professional life.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So you really do bring a lifetime of experience to this. For our listeners, some of whom may not be familiar with what we mean by patient or community partnered research, can you tell us a bit about how you took on that role and what it means to you?
Well, the idea of patient-partnered research is actually relatively new. And in my experience, the term patient partner and patient-partnered research, that was concurrent with the development of the strategy for patient-oriented research that we are all part of as SPORE-funded entities. And how I came into my relationship with CIHR is out of my clinical education relationship with UBC, where I have been teaching parts of the interdisciplinary healthcare education programming there for about 10 years now, focusing largely on interdisciplinary care skills and interdisciplinary comprehension skills that are designed to help each of the health disciplines to better understand exactly what it is that each other does so that they can effectively identify opportunities to cooperate and collaborate rather than compete when caring for the patients, is the way that I like to put it. And I was recruited from that setting into the founding efforts of the BC Support Unit in the summertime of 2016. And then we officially launched the support unit in November of 2016. And I have been on an expanding series of SPORE adventures ever since. And the Picky Network is just another of those.
Thank you. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with the acronyms that we've been so immersed with and toss around, CIHR is our national funding agency, and it's the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, and they receive money from the federal government and provide it to researchers. As you would have heard in our introduction, SPORE is not necessarily a fungus, as you might think of it. It is the strategy for patient-oriented research, and it is a important part of CIHR's mandate for achieving health for all Canadians. And Kent is talking about his partnership with the University of British Columbia and some of the other funded opportunities, such as the support unit, where that is a provincial partnership with CIHR to promote this kind of research. So we've got a lot of stuff packed into there. Kent, you have, as you say, you've been doing this longer than it's been given a term. I think that applies to a lot of people. So for people who are thinking of getting into this, where they would like to partner with researchers to help improve the research, what advice would you give somebody just starting down this road?
I would encourage anyone who might ever hear the sound of my voice or have the opportunity to download this podcast, who is a person with a visible congenital disability or condition like me, who wants to get involved in this kind of work, or who has been involved in this kind of work, but just not in some of the same circles. I would particularly encourage any more of those people to bring themselves forward and make themselves known, because one of the things that I have noticed the most since the proliferation of patient-oriented research and patient partnership in this area is that demographically, we haven't been as diverse as I would have hoped. And there seems to be a common overrepresentation of retirement age women with invisible conditions. And so I tend to be in a particularly rare space, not only because I am a man of working age, but also because, to my tremendous surprise, I tend to be one of very, very few, if not the only person with a congenital visible condition working in most of the environments in which I find myself. And I think the reason for that probably is because parts of health and science practice haven't really lent themselves to the participation and contribution of people with visible conditions or mobility disabilities before now.
And perhaps that will be one of the silver linings to the pandemic and the emergence of more virtual technology, is that people who may not have been able to participate before may be able to now. So thank you, Kent. That's really an important point. I do know that we have a lot of work to do in terms of equity and diversity in all realms: research, healthcare, and patient-partnered research. I was wondering if you had any messages for the researchers out there who would be new to patient-partnered research and are considering embarking on this bit of a paradigm shift in how you do this, what I consider a challenging but incredibly rewarding way to do research. I've been doing it for a while, so I don't know that I'm the best person to present this perspective, but do you have any messages for researchers?
Absolutely. Among each other, by now, we are definitely, preaching to the converted in the patient-oriented research space, because we not only have patient partners, but we have researcher partners, we have clinician partners, we have policymaker partners. And one of the things that I would say to researchers or any of those other stakeholders that would like to be able to participate in the work that we do is that it really is meant to be an interdisciplinary, again, relationship in the best interest of serving the patient outcomes. I like to say that patient benefit is the point of all healthcare, and the point of all health research is to inform best practices patient care. So if we can bear that in mind and sort of free ourselves from our self-interested silos, I think that we will ultimately be able to improve the practice of healthcare and science going forward into 2021 in what we hope will become the post-COVID era and beyond.
You are definitely preaching to the converted with me. I have felt that my research has become less intellectual rabbit holes and more relevant as I've engaged in patient-partnered research. I think that's one of our weaknesses as researchers is there's many challenges and we can be distracted by the purpose for what we're doing and why we're being funded to do it. I was wondering if you had a particular moment in your patient-partner journey that touched you or that you were really proud or really spoke to that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yes, the one that I like to talk about the most, I mean, as much as I love the Picky Network, one of my early on engagement love affairs, if you will, in the realm of the strategy for patient-oriented research is the work that I've been able to do with Childbright. Because I am a person who comes from a pediatric background, living with a neurological condition, the work of Childbright that focuses on pediatric brain-based conditions is close to me, and also because we have a fairly robust system of youth engagement that we've been able to do at Childbright, and I have a mindset, at least, of trying to train up and mentor the next generation of people with visible congenital disabilities who might ever have any interest in pursuing careers in any part of health and science. I would like very much to foster and support the aspirations of those people wherever we may be able to find them. But as with all things, it isn't necessarily the case that everyone with a visible congenital condition necessarily feels a need to pursue careers in health and science just because they have lived with experiences of health and science.
I think that's one of the things we do sort of try and encourage is there is room for all sorts of interest, and you don't necessarily have to go to the extent of pursuing training in the area. But I do think that your PhD and lived expertise in this makes you an invaluable partner in this aspect. And I hope that your words encourage others to get involved, no matter who they are and what perspective they're coming from. So any final words for our audience? We are necessarily keeping this short so we can just give you a little bit of a taster of what it looks like from the patient partner side to engage in this type of research, not only in the primary care world, as you've heard from Kent, but in all sorts of research areas. So any final words?
Yeah, I would just again encourage anybody who is working in this area or pursuing work in this area, mainly just to remember that even when you are maybe canvassing or crusading for the advancement of your own condition, if you want to be an effective patient partner, it's important as well to be able to be prepared to serve the good of the common patient and not just to focus on whatever is going to advance the improvement of your own condition. I think that healthcare only works when we're prepared to care about problems that we don't have. I would also encourage all of the engagers of patient partners to be increasingly prepared for patient partners who come to a space not only with lived experience, but also with professional background that might be relevant to your pursuits as well. I have continued to find that it's often a very strange space that I fit in the sense that too many times the patient partner's perspective is expected to be a lay perspective. And the thing that I would say to any health and science professionals who also have lived patient experience is never be afraid to contribute all the professional expertise that you can, but just make sure that your patient experience is always also left in.
Thank you, Kent. That is an excellent reminder for all of us. And we have certainly benefited from both your lived experience and your professional background. So I wanted to thank you for being with us today. I'd also like to thank our support staff who helped make this possible, our production staff, Nick Beaudry and Jamie Demore. Please join us in our next episode for more voices from our patient and community partners, where we are highlighting the active and engaging role they play in our patient-oriented research agenda for Partnered Primary Care Research Podcast. In other words, learn more about research for you and by you. Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by the Primary and Integrated Healthcare Innovations Network, otherwise known as the PICI Network, in collaboration with the British Columbia Primary Healthcare Research Network. Visit our website at sporpici.com. That's SPOR-PIHCI.com to learn more about our activities and upcoming events.